was Jesus. He was a maverick, a perceived rebel with a cause, a rabbi against the grain of what a rabbi should be. He didn't act like people thought he should. He didn't associate himself with who people thought he should. He was for the down and for the out, the underdogs, the misfits. And it's not just who was Jesus, it's also who is Jesus. When he died on a cross for our sins, he rose again 3 days later. He defeated death. The one who was became the one who is. He's not just a past tense ideal, but a present tense life changer. The past tense inspiration became the present tense king. The past maverick became the present master. He's the way, the resurrection, and the life, the good shepherd. He's the light of the world, the true vine, and apart from him, we can do nothing. Jesus, and Jesus alone, is our true north.
So why don't you grab your outline? We're actually starting a new series. It's called, guess what? True North. And we're in this culture where everybody's compass is pointed in slightly different directions. Would you agree with that? And what we're going to do in this series is we're going to try to find true north. And true north, now, theoretically speaking, if you wanted to get to true north from a physical standpoint, you would take out a compass, right? Okay, here's my little handy-dandy compass. And you would take that compass and you would just point it, and you would generally get the direction of north, right? Okay, and I mean, if you followed this perfectly and you didn't move an inch either way, I mean, you would get to true north, right? I mean, if you followed this perfectly, right, and you didn't move an inch either way, right? Are you with me? Yeah. So the most true north physically point in all the earth is actually the North Pole. So go ahead, give me that slide, Jonathan. Thank you. So there's the North Pole, right? Anybody been there? Right? I mean, so if you pointed this thing toward north, right? You took this compass and you put it and you didn't move. You just followed that direction, right? And you didn't move off at 1 centimeter, and you just kept walking. Would you end up at true north? Actually, you would not. Yeah, and you're thinking, well, why is that, Dave? Because almost every compass uses a magnet, and it takes you to magnetic north, right? Okay, so you're going to magnetic north, not true north. Jonathan, give me that next slide there. So what is magnetic north? So magnetic north is actually a location in Arctic Canada that has this. Arnie, have you been there? I don't know. So you've been close, right? Okay. Magnetic north is actually a location in Arctic Canada that has this iron ore underneath the earth, and so the magnet in the compass directs you to magnetic north, which is this point in Arctic Canada, which, by the way, is shifting all the time based upon magnetic functions and stuff like that. And so, where it points, the magnetic cord, it shifts, and it also depends on where you are in the country or in the world where you're going to be pointed to, where north is. There is a difference between magnetic north and true north, and it can be drastic. For example, if you're in Los Angeles and you're going to magnetic north, is actually true north. There's a 12-degree difference between magnetic north and true north from Los Angeles. Now, if you go to New Zealand, it's 20 degrees difference. So, I nerded out a little bit this week. Arnie can tell you this. I had him in a debate with me. I mean, no, we weren't debating, we were discussing. So I actually looked up the calculations for Lake Charles and this week, and Lake Charles is plus 0.44 degrees off of magnetic north versus true north. Did you get that? 0.44 degrees off magnetic north to true north. So we're better than Los Angeles, would you say? Okay, so we're not quite as far off as them in more ways than one. Anyway, so if you want to test this yourself, I mean, this is amazing, right? Okay. Every iPhone, I don't know if this is true on Androids or not, but if you have an iPhone and your iPhone is actually defaulted to set to magnetic north, but you can actually, because it uses a magnet in your phone, to get you there. But so you can change the setting in it to true north. And so I don't know if you see this. I laid my phone down, and if you'll notice what it says, 0 north, right? And I laid Vicky's exactly next to mine, and hers is still set on magnetic north. This is from my house, and notice the difference. I pointed to true north, and she's 45 degrees northeast. Is what she has when I'm on true north. See, that's the 0.44, right? Okay, you got that? So if you have to, you can change the settings on that. I don't know, but you'll know that they're off. And so what's interesting to me, so when you do that, there's a major difference between north and magnetic north. Are you with me? Okay, so they'll point you in two different directions, and so because they're off. And by the way, there's some lessons here that we're going to talk about in the following weeks, where we're going to think about this way in your life and mine. And if we follow the magnetic pull of our culture, you're never going to end up in true north ever. But my point is simply this. So if you're taking notes, magnetic north almost never aligns with true north. Almost never. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're saying, gosh, I didn't know that our pastor was such a geographic scientist. This is unbelievable, right? I know what you're really thinking. What you're really thinking is, who cares? I mean, you're generally in the north direction, so whether you're like magnetic north or true north, who cares? It doesn't really matter. You're still going in basically the same direction. I know that's really what you're thinking. But actually, folks, it matters more than you ever think, whether you're on true north or not. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you were going to a destination and you needed to get there and you were just 1 degree off. Not 3 degrees, just 1 degree off, right? So you're just 1 degree off and you're headed in that direction. If you're on in this airplane, right, and you're going to a destination and you were just 1 degree off, here's what we know. And these are facts. You can look them up yourself. After 1 hour, 1 degree off, you'd be 1 mile off your course. After 2 hours, you'd be going 2 hours, 1 degree off. You'd be 2 miles off your course. If you go to 3 hours, 1 degree off, going for 3 hours, you'd be, guess what? 3 miles off. If you go 4 miles, right? You're 4 hours, you're going 4 miles, you're off, right? By 4 miles, you're off your target. And what you're thinking, that's not a big deal, 4 miles. I can course correct and get back onto my target. But imagine living your lifetime, your entire life, just not quite on true north. For example, let's say that you were headed toward the moon. All right? Let's say the example of your life, and this is an example of your life, and you were just 1 degree off and you're trying to go to the moon. Based on this example, you know that you missed the moon, right? But do you know how far you'd miss the moon? If you were just 1 degree off traveling to the moon, the exact answer is 4,169 miles off. You'd miss the moon by 4,169 miles, 1 degree off. So imagine living your lifetime, in your life, not quite on true north, whether that's spiritually or in your marriage or with your kids or financially or with your career or with relationships. And by the way, that may be where some of us find ourselves today. We're just not quite on true north. And you know what the last 5 years, I think, have done to so many people. And I think it just took us a little bit off. I mean, you started turning to something, or you reached for something else, or something familiar, or maybe a substance, or maybe someone, and you knew it wasn't good. And it just kind of got off just a little bit. And what you need to realize today is that if you're off a little bit, it's time to get back to true north. And what we're going to do is, in this series, I want to show you how to get to true north. And there is a way to get to true north. Here's an overview of the entire series. Okay, are you ready for this? We're going to give you an overview for the next 4 weeks. As we lead into Easter, folks, I mean, that's what we're building toward. Here's what we're going to focus on. That Jesus is the only way that you'll find true north. Period. As a pastor, I've felt so, passionate that, where we are culturally as a church, and, especially as we're coming into Easter, that I think we just need to get back and focus on Jesus because he's the answer. Amen? And that's why we keep saying that we want to help people find and follow Jesus, but that means that we need to be focused on Jesus. That we need to be just zeroed in on him. We have been knocked off so much by circumstances and issues and things and issues that have just continually come our way over the last 5 years that I think, it's kind of just knocked us off our perch a little bit. And I'm telling you what's going on in this world. And, and the issue, I think, for so many of us today is I think there's a lot of confusion over who Jesus really is. I just heard yesterday that this guy that just got elected over in Texas somehow, just said that God's binary. I'm thinking, really? I don't know where he's finding that. But that's why I said there's a lot of confusion over who Jesus is. And so what I want to do is I want to focus. I want us to laser focus in on who Jesus is because he's the only one that can get us to true north. And the way we're going to do that in this series is that we're going to open up this book of Gospel of John. We're going to open up the Gospel of John, which, by the way, if you've never read the Bible, this is a perfect book to start in because here's a little background. John was a disciple of Jesus, and John records the words of Jesus for us. And in the book of John, this doesn't happen in any other gospel. What John does is actually record for us 7 I am statements that Jesus made. In other words, Jesus said, you want to know who I am? Definitively know who I am? Jesus says there are 7 I ams. He said it 7 times, and then he gives us the answer of who he is, 7 of them. And I think the number 7 is significant because in Scripture, 7 is a perfect number. So I think if you could encompass these 7 statements, they could change your life. So there are 7 I am statements in the book of John, all right? So, and what we're going to do is we're going to focus on 4 of them, and we'll encompass them. Go ahead and give me the next slide, Jonathan. So here they are. Here's the 7 statements. You can write them down real quick. Jonathan will leave them up for a minute. So here's the 7 I am statements, and we're going to encompass 4 of them, and you can see, which ones are highlighted are the ones that we're doing, right? Okay. So today, and I'm hoping, all of them really get us to true north, but we're just going to zero in on those. We're going to refer to the other ones, but that's what we're going to do. And today, I would tell you this: it doesn't matter if you're a Christian at all. I'm glad if you're here. I'm glad you're here today, and some of you, it's your first or second time maybe on our campus, and you still may be checking Jesus out. Maybe you've been here longer with us. You're going to know at the end of this series who Jesus is, who Jesus says he is. And if you're a Christian, if you've been a Christian for 50 years, I think you'll have a better understanding of Jesus, and you'll get back to, I believe, to a better true north in your life. And so today I want to start with the 5th one there. Okay, the 5th statement that says, that Jesus made, it says, I am the resurrection and the life, right? Okay, So let's look at John chapter 11, verse 25. And I want us to read this together. Would you say this out loud, the first part of this out loud with me together? Are you ready? Here we go. Verse 25. Jesus said, I am the resurrection. I am the resurrection and life. And then he goes on to say this, the one who believes in me will live even though they die, and the one who lives believing in me will never die. You know, I think this is one of the most definitive and powerful statements that Jesus ever makes about himself. And I think it's as relevant today as it's ever been. And let me tell you why I think it's so relevant. You know, when COVID hit us, there was a lot of fear and paranoia going on in the world. Remember that? Okay? You could see it everywhere. It was rampant even among Christians everywhere. And let's just be honest. Some of you were overcome with fear and paranoia. And now here we are with this war, you know, in Iran going on. I'm hearing people worried about it because, you know, they might be the end of the world. I mean, which seems to happen. People say that every time some serious conflict goes on in the Middle East. You know, and my question is, what is at the root of all this fear and paranoia that we have every time there is a crisis in the world? I have an opinion. I know that might strike you odd. And I'm not saying that you have to agree with me, but this is just my opinion of what it is. I think the root issue is the fear of death. You know, either me or someone I love could die. I think the issue is that so many people are afraid to die. Psychologist and author Ernest Becker wrote a book several years ago entitled The Denial of Death. The premise of his book, he stated that he believed that man's basic motivation for life is death. Woody Allen put it this way so eloquently. It's not that I'm afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. You know, I've always, what he says so humorously is this, you know, I'm afraid to die, which is really interesting, right? I mean, I've always said it this way, I'm not afraid to die, I'm just afraid of getting there, or getting dead, right? Anybody else? You know, if you think about it, it's kind of a fear that we have of death by which all the statistics prove. Most statistics say that the only thing that people fear more than death is what? Public speaking. You just feel like you're going to die, right? Okay. So it's interesting to think about this fear of death. Here's what all of us know intuitively. You know that actually death is natural. Death is going to happen to every single person here today. Thanks a lot, Dave. This is such an encouraging message on the day that, you know, it's dark, it's gloomy, it's raining, and I lost an hour of sleep. Thanks a lot, Dave, right? George Bernard Shaw said it this way, the statistics on death are quite impressive. 1 out of 1 people die. You know that one day will be your last day on earth. And it's not very comfortable, right, for us to think about it. It's almost like, I don't really want to talk about that, Dave. Can we change the subject here? You know, and my guess is you're probably not going to, after the service, get your family together for a big meal and everybody together, and you're going to say, hey, let's talk about how we're all going to die someday. Probably not going to happen. And yet you know that intuitively it's 100% true. And it's into this uncomfortable thing that Jesus speaks, and he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes even in me, though they die, will live, and whoever believes in me will live, and they will never die. I think that we have to understand this statement, and the way we do is to really look at the context in which Jesus said it in John chapter 11. And so I want to walk you through this story in John chapter 11. And actually, Jesus says this statement at a funeral. I mean, he's at a funeral with a man named Lazarus that he cares very deeply about. And so in John chapter 11, starting in verse 1, this is what it says. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. So Lazarus has two sisters, right? And Lazarus gets sick. Now, we don't know what he got sick from. We don't know how he got sick. We don't know what kind of disease it was. All we know is that the sickness was bad enough that the sisters felt like they needed to call upon Jesus for help. Okay, so in verse 3, look what it says there. So the sisters sent word to Jesus. He wasn't there. So they sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now that's a pretty bold statement, right? I mean, they didn't even use Lazarus' name here. They just said, hey, tell Jesus the one he loves is sick. That's pretty much, tells you that Jesus loved this guy, right? I mean, he was an important person to Jesus. And so we know this man was sick and that people were crying out to Jesus for help. And if I could just pause here for just a moment, I just want to acknowledge that there's some of you here today, or maybe you're watching online, that you're calling out to Jesus for help in some regard. Maybe you're not feeling well. Maybe you know a loved one that's sick. Maybe you're dealing with some deep anxiety, or maybe you lost your job, or economically you're so scared, or maybe your marriage is, honestly, it's not going that well, and so you're calling out for Jesus for help. Or maybe there's some other relationships that are broken in your life, and you just need some help. Or maybe, maybe just life is just overwhelming right now, and you just need Jesus. There may be someone here today that this past week you got some of the worst news of your life. And I put myself in that boat just a little bit. Because as I started writing this message on Tuesday, that morning I had a back procedure that's supposed to relieve some of the severe pain that I have in my back. And quite honestly, it hasn't done a whole lot. Okay? I've got a lot of issues. It's a long story. And later in the day, I got a call from my neurosurgeon who's over in Houston that told me that after my recent test results, they got them back, and he says that my back was so far gone that the surgery he was considering doing, he said, wouldn't help me, and that what I really needed was a radical reconstruction of my lower back that would require 6 months to recover from. And he said he wouldn't even recommend that because he wasn't sure, how much long term it would help me, and he would guarantee me almost assuredly that I would have other corrective surgeries in the future. And he said, basically, Dave, you're just going to have to learn to live with the pain. I got off that phone call. And it wasn't a half hour later, I got a text from my best friend's wife telling me my best friend passed away. I don't know if you remember, but all this happened on the anniversary of Dave Benigno's funeral. I've been a little depressed this week. I haven't been fun to be around. Anybody had those? When I got the news about my best friend dying, let me tell you what I didn't say. I didn't say, well, it's going to happen for all of us someday. I mean, it's just natural, right? I guess it was just his time to go. I didn't say that because I think the only people that say things like that haven't really experienced death. You watch the movies, and in the movies people die, and it's like really quiet and peaceful. They're always peaceful. Their eyes just close, and they just close their eyelids, and you go, oh. Folks, I can just promise you, as a pastor who's been with multiple, In multiple situations, multiple times, I've been with people who are on their deathbed and been with them when they took their last breath, and I can promise you that it doesn't happen that way, hardly ever. In fact, in Scripture, Scripture is so real with us. The Apostle Paul is talking about what Jesus came to do for us. And here's how he describes death. In 1 Corinthians in chapter 15, verse 26, he says, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Death, folks, is an enemy. It's an enemy. So how is Jesus able to defeat this enemy? Just hold that thought, would you? I want to continue the story with Lazarus, and if you really haven't read it in a while, or maybe you've read it multiple times, I just want to encourage you to go back and read all of John chapter 11. But just to catch you up, in verses 4 through 16, what basically happens is word gets to Jesus that this man that he loves is sick. And so what does Jesus do? Nothing. He waits for 2 days. Which is so interesting when you read the story. And if you never knew the end, okay, and you'd be like, but it just proves to me that if you're waiting for, sometimes God's delays are not God's denials. And oftentimes God is doing something in you, and he's waiting, but he's going to do something good that he's planned for you. And so what we see is, the word comes to Jesus and he waits, and then he finally shows up, and, he's showing up at Lazarus' house where Mary and Martha are, and we see this in verse 17, and he says this, he says, on his arrival, Jesus found Lazarus already in the tomb. He's dead, okay? He's been dead for what? What's the text say? 4 days, okay? Now, this is so significant. Everyone would have known this, what this meant in Jesus' day, because in Jewish culture, they believed that when you died, your spirit hovered over your body for 3 days, okay? But after 3 days, it's over. You're dead as a doornail, all right? There is no hope. When Jesus shows up on day 4, what they're thinking is, Jesus, you're too late. It's done. You missed your opportunity. And if I could put this into modern day terms, it would be like some of us, we have a wayward child and we've chased him for so long and it's done. Nothing's happening. Or your marriage, you've tried, healing for so many years, but it's dead. At least that's how you feel. Or you have some relationships that, that have been broken in the past, and there's just no signs of life, all right? CPR ain't working anymore. Or you've been looking for a new job, or you've been trying to overcome anxiety for so long. It's just dead, and you've given up hope. It's day 4. By the way, this is where everyone with Lazarus, everybody, and into this, that's where they thought, and into this environment we get to see, based on Mary and Martha's and everyone else's response, there are basically, I think, 2 common responses that you experience, with pain or loss. And here's the first one. Okay, here's the first response, and it's really, 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 really big. Their first response is this: if Jesus would have shown up in my past, he could have saved what I lost. If Jesus could have just shown up back there, the marriage, wouldn't be dead. My child wouldn't have gone off. I'd be better off right now. If my circumstance, Jesus would have shown up in my situation, in my circumstances, in my hardship, if Jesus would have just shown up then, You know, I'd be better off right now if Jesus would have done something in my past. And I want you to see how clear this is. Because when Jesus shows up, Martha just says it straight to him. I mean, he shows up and Martha says, Lord, Martha said to him, okay, if you'd been here, everybody, my brother wouldn't have died. Now, Mary shows up, and what does Mary say? The exact same thing. You know, Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, and she fell at his feet, and she said, Lord, if you had been here, if you had just shown up in the past, we wouldn't be dealing with this. Thanks a lot. And you can almost just feel the anger there, can't you? At least the confusion or the disillusionment with Jesus. I thought you loved him. So what's interesting to me, even the people around them, not even related to Lazarus, you know, listen to what they said. They said, look at this. But some of them, they said, could not he, who is that? Jesus, okay? Who opened the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying? He's been healing people all like crazy. Why didn't he do it for him? If Jesus would have just shown up in the past, he could have saved what I lost. Have you ever been there with God? We talked about this last week with Elisha, the man who lost the axe head. I would just tell you, I have been there in my life many times. I have been angry because I thought God could have done something in the past, so I wouldn't be dealing with what I'm dealing with in the present. And here's what happens. Jesus replies to this kind of thinking. He says to Martha, your brother will rise again. And Martha responds kind of the way that we would respond when you have a loss or maybe a death. And, you know, people come up to you and say, well, you're going to see him one day again in heaven. You know, or your pain or your loss. And someone, you say, well, I guess one day in heaven there will be no more pain. There'll be no more tears. Or let's say that you have this big loss and maybe you're a pet lover and you lost an animal, or maybe your cat died, and someone will say, well, guess what? There's good news. You can buy a dog now. Don't email me, cat lovers. That's a joke, okay? Just don't email me. You know how when someone says something in those situations that it's not that it doesn't bring some comfort, it just doesn't add total comfort because you're in the middle of a loss. And what happens right after Mary says this, Jesus, you know, says this to Martha. Martha answers, you know, well, Jesus, I mean, look at what the text says. I mean, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection at the last day. What's she saying? Yeah, I know you didn't do something in the past. And she thinks he's talking about the future, so we get this second common response that we have, that people have, and it's this. You know, we have loss and we pay him and say, yeah, you know, Jesus could have done something in the past, but the second response is often, you know, well, I guess Jesus has the power to give me hope someday in the future. You know, I'm experiencing major loss right now, and maybe one day I'll feel better, even if it's in heaven, and then I'll feel better. This is how we often respond. For those of you who lost a job, or lost a loved one, or lost a dream, or lost a relationship. Sure, it can add a little comfort that, maybe one day, even if it's off in heaven, Jesus can restore your life. But isn't it true? And don't you hope, just even this little bit, that Jesus can bring hope, not into the future, but in your life today? Don't you hope that Jesus isn't just powerful enough that he could have done something in the past, and sure, he can do something in the future, but don't you hope that Jesus can give hope and life to you today? I want you to listen to Jesus' response to this attitude, to these two attitudes. If you could have done something in the past, sure, I think you could do something in the future. Into both of these responses, Jesus weighs in with one of the most weighty I am statements that he makes. And he says, what? I am the resurrection and the life. And when he says that, based on these responses, he asks this $1 million question. What? Do you believe this? Do you believe it? Not that I am God of yesterday and not that I'm a God tomorrow, but that I have the power to bring the resurrection and, to your life today. Listen to what he says. He doesn't say, I can be the resurrection one day. What does he say? I am the resurrection and the life. I am. And in that moment, you know that Jesus, what he does to prove that he can do something? Guess what he does? He raises Lazarus from the dead, right? Okay? And when he's getting ready to do this, you know what happens, you can go back and read the story. This is a lot of fun. I mean, you got to find the humor and understand what's going on and the dynamics. Jesus asks for the stone, which is the way they buried him, in graves and tombs like that. He says, roll the stone away. And he's asking everyone's, Jesus, don't do it, right? Do not do it. The dude is dead. And if you read the King James Version, you know what it says there? Don't do it, Lord. He stinketh. That's really what it says. Don't do it, Lord. He's dead. There's no way that you can revive that thing. And you can see everybody's going, where's my mask? Have you ever had anything in your life that stinketh? It's been dead for so long, the dream is dead. You're thinking, Jesus can't revive this. It stinketh. And Jesus walks into that situation. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. I am today. And here's what Jesus is telling us. And his response to our pain and loss is Jesus proves the resurrection isn't just about future possibilities. It's not just about future possibilities. The resurrection can be a present reality in your life and in mine. The resurrection can be a present reality in your life and mine. Why? Because we need to understand this, folks. Jesus specializes in bringing dead things back to life. It's not what he does. Folks, it's who he is. And when Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life, what Jesus is saying is that anywhere I step, anywhere where my presence is in the room, dead things will come back to life. Do you believe it? And that big question, because of our belief, has to play a part in what Jesus is and what his power can do. And so, and this is so big for us here today. I think this is so big for someone here today because you're not sure that Jesus can bring this dead thing back to life. And I want to ask you a question. If Jesus steps into the room and everywhere he steps, he brings dead things back to life. He's the resurrection and the life. Where does Jesus reside today? You say, well, he's in the building. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, we're gathered here because of Jesus is here, right? Folks, Jesus ain't in the building, all right? I'm just saying. Well, he's in heaven. He rose again. But, yeah, but no. If you're a follower of Jesus, here today, I want you to let this sink in. Where does Jesus reside today? Where he resides is in you. I want you to think about the implications of that. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is in you. Jesus is Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is inside of you. And if you've given your life to Jesus and you have gone all in, and if you've been baptized into Him, then you have that same power. Which means I just want to get up in somebody's grill today. I mean, let me take a breath. Do you believe it? Do you understand that means it's the same power? That you're thinking that something's dead, that it stinketh. And you're thinking that Jesus can't go in there because you can't touch it. That dream that you think is dead, I want you to understand this. Jesus can revive it. That thing that you feel in your heart that's dead, Jesus can deal with it. He can breathe new life. You think that relationship, is over, it's done, there's no way, it stinketh? Jesus can raise it and bring it back to life. And some of you are feeling spiritually dead. And you know why? Because some of you here today, you've never really gone all in with Jesus. And you know what holds you back? Maybe for some of you, you've messed up something so bad, or you've done something that you haven't told anybody about, or you think there's no way Jesus could come and restore this, or I've messed up my life way too much, or I want you to understand this. That's wrong. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And folks, I want you to understand there's no caveat. Some of you here have a marriage that's, it's dead in your eyes, but it's not in God's. Some of you have relationships or financial challenges you think are long gone, but not in God's eyes. Some of you have a job and you're at a dead end. Think Jesus can't break through this. But He can. And He can bring new life. And I want to talk to somebody who's single here today. And you're so lonely and it's been so long. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And you're looking for maybe the wrong thing. There is a man that can make a difference. There is somebody that can pour into your life and make a difference. And that's Jesus. And if you invite Him in, you better believe that he can give you hope and restoration and life today. And I don't care what desert you're in. He can bring you life. How does he have that power? For those of you that are new, I mean, Jesus has the power because he's the only person on earth to come and live a perfect life and to die and 3 days later be raised from the dead. And he has the power to restore anything at any time in your life. And I don't care who you are, he has the power. He's the only person that's ever risen from the dead. That gives him the power. And the same power that raised Jesus from the dead exists in you, you know, if you've given your life to Jesus. Who is Jesus? He is the resurrection and the life. He is true north. And what some of you know is that you've had a season where you have just been off true north. You've turned to something else, you've turned to someone else, you've turned to something else. And what God is calling you today to do is to get back to true north. And if you've never gone all in with Jesus, oh, maybe you've been at church, maybe you come, maybe you have, but you've never gone all in with Jesus. I want to challenge you today to take that step. It's a free gift. Now, Jesus says, follow me, and I will give you rest. Listen, you don't get your life into order first, and you just decide to follow him, period. I mean, you can take that step to make Jesus the Lord of your life, and you can get baptized into him, and if you'll have the power of Jesus in your life today, and you can do that today. I mean, I pass these cards out every week because one of the things on the card is for you to make a decision on it. You can just put it in the offering plate, and I pick it up and tell you. No one else sees these. You can text me. You can email. My contact information's in the bulletin. You can come talk to me after the service back here in the prayer area. If you're watching online, you can just type in, I want Jesus in my life, in the comment section, and I'll try to be in touch with you the best I can. And I will help you take that step so that Jesus becomes your resurrection and life. But I also want to talk to the followers of Jesus here as well. You've forgotten that Jesus can bring anything back to life, including your dead faith, including your lukewarmness. He can reignite that fire. And it's time that you get back to true north and trust him again. What's dead in your life that needs resurrecting?